David, why don't you do your reading and then I'll do the opening prayer and then we'll get started.
Okay, Marty, thank you. Today's reading is from Paradise Lost.
And
Milton. One of the things that I find so unique about Paradise Lost is that Milton writes about all the angels. He talks about Satan, he talks about the archangels, and he has a lot of angels there. But in my reading, I could only find reference to one human being in the entire epic, and that human being was Galileo. And John Milton knew Galileo. They had visited together, and he talked with Galileo, and he wrote about Galileo. But he mentions Galileo by name in Paradise Lost. Through optic gas, the Tuscan artist views at evening from the top of Fiesole, or in Valdarno, to descry new lands, rivers, or mountains in her spotty globe. And when by night the glass of Galileo, less assured, observe imagined lands and regions in the moon, or pilot from amidst the Cyclades, Delos or Samos first appearing gens, a cloudy spot. Thank you, Marty, and back to you.
Thank you, David. Anyway, putting aside, when I read it when I was younger, I imagined a physical paradise. Okay. And now I want you to think we study Torah. Was Eden a physical place or is it a spiritual place?
Both.
Yeah. Could it be both?
Sure. Both. It could be both, but think about it. Think about it in the context of Torah. So we don't want to lose paradise. Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, rabbis.
Shabbat shalom. And hi, Rabbi Mary, too. Oh, boy. We got
Shabbat shalom
this time. Well.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi Mary, today, too.
That's right. I'm going to.
Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Shabbat shalom. I'll read our opening prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, we are now on Numbers 29, verse 1. And so we're going to go through this a little. If you remember, we've been going through a bunch of sacrifices for the various feasts related to holy rituals. Okay, and it's a simplified way of looking at it. And we are in the midst of that. So, David, why don't you start us off with reading verses 1 to the end of verse 6.
Okay, will do. And I believe we're going to talk about the origins of Rosh Hashanah back in ancient history. And in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, ye shall have a holy convocation. Ye shall do no manner of servile work. It is a day of blowing the horn unto you. And ye shall prepare a burnt offering for a sweet savor unto the Lord. 1 young bullock, 1 ram, 7 he-lambs of the first year without blemish. And their meal offering, fine flour mingled with oil, 3/10 parts for the bullock, 2/10 parts for the ram, and 1/10 part for every lamb of the 7 lambs. And 1 he-goat for a sin offering, to make atonement for you. There's more than Rosh Hashanah here. Beside the burnt offering of the new moon, and the meal offering thereof, and of the continual burnt offering and the meal offering thereof, and their drink offerings according to their ordinance, for a sweet savor, an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Okay. So any comments about this?
No, but
Well, I think
I have some
in these,
questions on why they're so specific in how many bulls, how many rams, how many goats, that the numbers obviously have some importance too. And as a cook, the only thing I can think of is, man, that was a lot of work. Um, they were
This
busy
is
in the kitchen.
this is uh, basically for a this is sacrificial, and it is a lot of work. So you're right. Um, I'm going to any other ideas?
Well, didn't we have listing of the specific recipe items, I guess, to use Mary Ann's context? Didn't we have that previously? And I apologize, I haven't been with you for a couple of weeks, but haven't we had that? I mean,
Yes.
the ordinary introduction to the first day of the seventh month is the same as the other Rosh Chodesh observances. But
Right.
what is added is the sounding of the shofar.
Shofar. That's
Right.
right.
yeah,
And incidentally, it's the mitzvah is not to be the one to blow the shofar. The mitzvah is to hear the shofar.
Yeah.
That's right. So I guess we thank the shofar blower for giving us the opportunity to hear the shofar.
Right.
So give Mike Finkelstein a pat on the back when you see
Absolutely.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the blessing, the bracha is lishmoa kol shofar. Is is to hear the sound of the shofar. And
Since this topic has come up before, okay, in a different context, when you hear the shofar, what does it invoke in you? What does it evoke? I should say evoke in you.
I'll take notes so I can write the next sermon for next year.
Well, it's we have a prayer that starts out, "Hear, O Israel." Moses is asked in a soft voice to speak to the Israelites. Okay. So what are what's going on here?
That the sound, the vibrations go to the heart.
Okay.
Or
And
to
what does that do?
it awakens you to the presence of God or the voice of God or an awareness. That's how I see it. And I've only heard it a few times, not like you guys, but that it just seems to vibrate in my heart.
Sure. I think
And-
that's yes, David.
and I like to see it as going back into the dawn of time when our people were in the desert. They had been, they have succeeded in leaving Egypt, and they are in the desert, still not far from Mount Sinai, and they are told in this dawn of history to celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that's why I think these passages are extremely important.
Sure. Any other ideas about why sound is the sound and the sensation of sound is very important?
In Eastern thought, the singing bowls, the Om, that there are different meditations, different chants that they believe, like quantum physics, affects all of the body and the soul. So I think this is consistent worldwide, just depending on how they do it.
Okay. Well, for that reason, why do they use drums in some cultures?
Drums are the heartbeat. When you, especially, when you listen to native drumming, it's in sync with a heartbeat.
So there are different ways of reaching people, but but they can, hear a sound, but unless they're moved by the sound, they're going to, in some way.
It also sound can create happiness in a person. And if you take certain types of music, certain types of music will get people up and dancing. That's a happy situation. Other sounds may bring people to tears. But that's just a fact. That's just the way it is. If you go to a funeral service, if the funeral director, one of the things the funeral may provide is music for people who have to bury a loved one, and they will ask, well, we have these, what kind of music would you like? They may bring in a chamber orchestra because that might be the most appropriate music venue for the service, because it's a very sad event. And somebody said, well, we're going to bring in, I'd like to have a jazz band because I don't want to create a sad situation, although it is, but I want to create a balance, let's say, for lack of a better answer. So sound is very, very important. The drums and other types. The reason why it's really so important, because God gave that to you. Whatever God gives you is important. It's God-given. That's really, I believe, the behind the importance of that.
Very good, Michael. Very good. Any other ideas? I mean, medically, we can say that hearing is one of the last senses to leave the dying body. Yes, go ahead, Kent, and then Donna. Kent, you're muted.
Got it. I subscribe more to what David shared, and in its purest form for me, in listening to the shofar, which invariably I close my eyes to take it in. It just harkens to ancient days and ancient Israel and its peoples in the beginnings, and it's as natural a sound as you will get using an instrument of an animal. That there's no metal in there, there's no handcrafting this and that. So it had to be thought of. It was widely held as an instrument of communication, and invariably, I would imagine to either bring people together or to alert people to something. And relative to the the Torah in the writings, it's to bring people, to alert them to God's word. So that's how I sense it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Donna?
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everyone. There's two things that I've. First is you shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. So it gives you, that's a clue that this is one day. The other thing is that it's quite loud when you blow, and I'm sure they had different sizes, And we talked about that last week. That's a way to allow other people to hear it. And they know also that that is the first day. I don't know how far, if they do that, like the smoke signals we had talked about,
That's
Uh,
another, sure.
of sounding it off and then somebody else on the mountain or whatever. So those are the two things that I've seen.
So those of us that live in the desert, when you hear the sound of a train's horn or whistle, okay, how far can you hear
For miles.
it? Easy.
It's,
Right.
I don't live near the train tracks, but I can hear them
That's
all the way
right.
over here.
Hmm.
And it's how far sound can travel.
That's right. Yes, yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe, and it's okay to do so. Believe me, I'm not criticizing it, but I'm wondering if maybe we're focusing a little bit too much on some other reasoning that goes into the choice of the shofar of the ram's horn. It certainly, as we mentioned, it was loud. It's never described as pleasing.
Right.
It's always supposed to be something that awakens you, or and arouses them. Whether on Rosh Hashanah in the liturgy, whether it's aroused from your complacency, uh, or it could be to arouse, gather everyone together for battle or for assembly or celebration or whatever it might be. But it's never a pleasing, satisfying sound described in the tradition. Now we all have those layers of anything from nostalgia to what we want to place into the experience of listening, whether it's closing your eyes, whatever it might be. I have to relate a little story. I'm not a first-hand, I'm a second-hand participant. For one of the big Reform synagogues in New York City, Elie Wiesel was invited to come and speak or do a teaching or something on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. I don't remember if this was Temple Emmanuel, Temple Central Synagogue, or Temple Israel, one of the big ones in New York City. And but it was close to where he lived, so he could walk. And he accepted the invitation until they got to the shofar service. Now, in the 50s and 60s, I don't necessarily think it happened much later than that. Many Reform temples, they didn't substitute for a shofar, but they enhanced the sound of the shofar with a French horn, which was a much more pleasing
Sure.
much more
Sure.
pleasing sound, and whatever. And the story is, again, I have it secondhand from someone who was there, that Elie Wiesel literally stood up and walked out because when asked later, he said because the shofar should not be a pleasant sound. It needs to be a reminder of all that is harsh and difficult in life, and calls us together to respond to all those things.
Thank you. very much. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, the way I understand it from my Orthodox teaching when I was a kid, it's uh, it's a shrill. It's more of a shrill type of a sound.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And also what I can remember, the shofar is not. You don't play the shofar. You don't blow the shofar. The shofar is sounded. That's the way I remember. It's sounded. That's the way it's in the Orthodox, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be heard far and wide. And that shrill is supposed to be the sound is supposed to be the awakening, to wake up that sound. And so I can understand uh, walking out if you mix it with a French horn. That's totally inappropriate. You know, as far as in my view, it's not supposed to be that way whatsoever.
So how if they used a trumpet?
No, because a trumpet is not a shrill sound. It's one of the most beautiful horns. That's especially with a professional trumpet player, the sound is gorgeous.
Mhm.
You know, you want to hear it. It's a beautiful sound. Has no comparison with the ram's horn whatsoever.
But the
And
trumpet that
what
you're
about
talking about is not the trumpet that we're using now, that you can get to different tones and so forth. The trumpet was very similar to a shofar, in which you put the air and the air comes out. And they used that in shofarot and hatzotzrot. They used to use them, like saying, after me, in the military, they'll use
the bugle?
drums to start the walking and so we see it several times, that David goes up to the mount with shofarot and hatzotzrot, but we're talking about a very simplistic thing. It's not an orchestra. It's a sound, as you say, Michael. It's a sound. And I believe that if you have the simple hatzotzra, the simple trumpet, you don't get music. You get a
You
sound.
got a blast.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's and those of us that have heard shofars from different animals, horns,
Mm-hmm.
as some are short, some are long, and like that, some a different
And
shape.
depending on how many twists there are,
That's right.
which is the same as as the musical instrument. If I may go back to Dawn's thing of yes, it absolutely biblically was similar to the smoke signals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the first one, the high priest or whomever would stand on the toppest, what's it called, a parapet, or whatever, of the old city in Jerusalem. And as soon as the three witnesses saw the new moon or whatever, blow the shofar, and then on the next hill, and then on the next hill, and the
Oh.
next hill, they would just pick it up, going in all directions, and that's how the word passed.
And I talked last time, if we spoke about the moon, as Rabbi is mentioning now, that they used to do fires on top of the mountains as well. It's the shofar at the time that we're talking about is about communication, as you say, Rabbi. It's just communicating something that's happening. And mainly is the ram and the story of Abraham and Isaac and Isaac that comes. That's the ram that comes there. And that's one of
What I don't know, and Miri, maybe you do know, what I don't know is that whether in announcing or calling people to assembly or battle, or whether announcing the new moon, if it was a different, what we say, a different call, like we have, Tekiah, True,
Yeah.
or if it was just a simple blast, that I don't know.
And I don't know, for me, Norm, is the first time that I hear it as the connection with the new moon and telling the people that the new
Okay.
moon.
Yeah.
I always thought it was only fire. And I also spoke, and correct me if it's not right, why we in the diaspora have 2 days to make sure that
That at least one of the days,
right,
at least
right,
one of the days would be the same.
would
Exactly.
fall on that,
Right.
because the notification will take time. So that's why I'm not sure that was the shofar, or maybe the shofar announced, okay, put the fire on now, and something like that. So
Well,
I
that's
don't
the
know.
consequence of hearing it. That, that's the
Yeah.
result of hearing it. You start the fires and doing everything else.
Right.
But it's interesting. But sound is a very important, one of the most important senses that we have. And you start wondering how people who are deaf, like take someone like Beethoven, was able to put his hand on a piano and sense the vibrations
Yeah.
in the piano, and he'd know the
Yeah.
notes.
But
That's
it's different, Marty. It's really different. And as I'm thinking now, the fact that we have Torah, the other one,
Shvarim,
Yeah.
it's instead of different notes, Michael, because I used to say, do, re, mi, and
Right.
here
It's
they
one note.
cannot do that, so they do aroch, trua, shvarim. So each one is for creating it's not a different sound, but it is a different sound. You have to do it differently. I
Yeah.
think.
Hey, Marty.
Yes.
First, I want to confirm that we're on the first lines of chapter 29 of Numbers, correct? Am I
Yes.
right?
1
Yeah.
through 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's something interesting in that first line that I didn't catch the first time I read it, but the second and third time. And that's this. In the language in my Tanakh, in English, it says, "You shall observe it as a, quote, day when the horn is sounded." Okay, so we all agree that that's what it says. But the very first sentence, it refers to it the first day of the month as a sacred occasion, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you shall not work at your occupations. All right. So it is this like a Sabbath to you
Right.
because it's that day. All right.
Right.
So then the question is, well, when I read that, it's written as though the horn is only sounded on sacred occasions.
Only on that.
As opposed, okay, you shall observe a sacred occasion, not work. You shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. All right, so if the horn's not sounded, what is it? It's a regular day. So that's interesting in this conversation we're having and discussion about all the different uses of it, right? But that's not what I'm reading here. It's like it's to be used as part of a sacred day. And I'm simply taking it literally as it's translated here. And I'd like to hear somebody else on that, but that's what I'm reading here. I
You're
don't
right.
see an exception to that.
All
No
right.
other holidays that you sound the shofar. Only Yom Kippur at the end, and I don't remember if it says that or not. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like in every holiday, there is something specific. The one that's coming up, what's specific about it? We eat matzah, okay, all those days. On Shavuot, we make blintzes. No, that's a joke. On Shavuot, we bring the first fruit. So the shofar is, it's about Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi.
Yeah, two responses or answers, they're not exhaustive. One is that on the other holidays or festivals, you don't sound the shofar, you sound the chatzara, the
Atzotzra.
trumpet, the horn, not the ram's horn. Okay, that's part of those celebrations. That goes back to chapter 10 in Numbers. And the other is the way the commentators do it is they're saying, aha, they're listing the order of the things that you should do to observe what we now call Rosh Hashanah, but in the Torah is called Yom Teruah or Yom Zikaron.
Right.
Okay, and it starts with having the shofar sounded.
Right.
Okay, that's why it's listed as the first thing in the description of the holy day.
Right.
I want to point out something else that we spoke about last time. Look at the very, very first verse, Ken. It starts into something that you could say, this is weird. If you start the verse, look what it says. What's the very beginning of the first verse?
The
In the
very
seventh
first
month.
one, in the 7th month, on the first day of
Right.
the month.
Right,
Mhm.
7 months, and here we're talking about Rosh Hashanah. You know, Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. We think or we assume, and we call it the beginning of the year. But here they're telling you it's the 7th month. So we should ask what's going on.
Well, that's just, well, I read it as another sacred day in a litany of other sacred days where the horn is the shofar is sounded. And
Right.
what I take, I mean, most directly from this is that the horn, the shofar, was not used to call for dinner. It was not used to sound the troops for an attack. It was not.
No.
It was probably a trumpet. It was only used in sacred occasions.
Right, but in this sacred occasion, what my point now is regarding the very first two words of this verse. On the 7th month, and we call it Rosh means head. So it's, we say Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. And usually we celebrate as this is the beginning of the year. But in the Torah, it says, no, this is the 7th month of the year. So why did we convert it in Rosh? I don't know. But the first day of the year is actually on Pesach, on Passover.
Well, the first day of the month in which Passover.
Yeah, in
Right,
that
yeah.
step.
And in the order in which these festivals are addressed in this parsha, it begins with the first day of the first month.
Right.
And just that in the cycle, we've now gotten to the 7th month.
Right, so the first month is not this. And we celebrate it as if it was January, you know, we're beginning the year.
Right.
And the issue, and I'm just going a little out of it because I think that for me, it's a very important issue to celebrate January, the beginning of the year, on the 7th month. And the point that we can see is that in the Torah, for us, there are 4 beginnings of year. It's like, I'm just going away from this, and but I think it's important for us to know. So we have Pesach, we have, Pesach is the beginning of the year, and then we have Tu B'Shvat, the beginning of the year of the trees, and then we have the beginning of the years of the kings, and then we have the beginning of the years of the, and I always forget this one,
The Torah.
the Torah, the Shavuot, yeah. So, and people say, what's going on? And my point is that
Hmm.
the beginning of the year of school is in September. The beginning of the year of the taxes is in April. The beginning of the year of your birthday is wherever it is. So anyways, this was a side, but I think that we have to pay attention that Rosh Hashanah is not the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
The beginning of what? Of the kings? Is that the kings?
No, it's agricultural.
Agriculture.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agriculture. Anyway, it's
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's fascinating. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
everyone. Michael has been very patient. Nobody has paid attention to his raising of his
oh,
hand for
Michael,
a
I'm
half
so
hour now.
sorry.
So please, give Michael a chance. Okay,
Okay,
please.
That's very sweet, Marty. Thank you very much, and for everybody, that's okay. It's not a problem. So I want if I may be allowed to make one more point with the sounding of the shofar, and for me, it's about awakening. The way a way that the shofar is sounded with the different blasts and the different ways it is. It's awakening and pay attention. That's why it's not stagnant. That's
Yeah.
why it's not a straight do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. It's not a that. It's to get your attention. It's an awakening.
Sure.
Get your attention and focus on that sounding.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Anyway, I just wanted to say that what the rabbis were getting after is sort of important. We have also covered several different senses, okay, in this passage. We hear it again and again. This is not unique, but it's the sacrifices that the burnt offerings, a pleasing odor to God, but we get a waft of that in the area in which it's burning also. So our sense of smell is also being addressed. So,
I want to mention, Marty, another thing that I remember from my study of Talmud that I found kind of funny. In the Talmud, they talk about how are you supposed to listen to the shofar, because we have the mitzvah is to listen to the shofar. And they discuss, for example, if that playing the shofar or doing the shofar, I don't know how to say it, in the shul, in the synagogue, and you just pass by and you kind of hear like the train, that doesn't count.
right.
So it's interesting that needs to be intention in the listening.
Sure. Yes, David.
I wanted to say something on a thought about Mr. Wiesel, who felt that the shofar should be an unhappy sound. With all due respect and a lot of respect to the man, I disagree. I've always found the sound of the shofar one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard in my life. And I remember once when at our Shar Shemayim in Montreal, when the shofar playing was particularly beautiful, our rabbi, after it was over, he called it a shofar symphony. And it really is so beautiful, it makes me cry, the sound of the shofar. And reading the origins of it today in the book of Numbers, it's making me feel the same way. It's bringing back the emotion from childhood of this beautiful, beautiful instrument. Well, I want to ask a question. When you prepare a shofar, does that, you take the ram's horn off the ram, does that kill the ram or not?
It should.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so
I
either.
don't know, does it regenerate totally? I don't know that.
No, it doesn't.
Right, but no,
I
but
don't
no,
think that
that-
it doesn't. And today we're talking about not removing the tusks from the elephants or the, I don't know what you call it in the rhinoceros, because
It's a
it's
tusk.
part of what they are. I don't know if they kill them, but they do something to them.
Well, they can't use it what it's for, what it's used for. Okay, so you're harming the ability of the animal to do its animal think. You know, it's the way
Defend itself.
it behaves.
Yeah.
So yes, Donna.
Well, maybe the ram that gets his horn cut off was used also for one of the sacrifices.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of cute. Yeah.
Could
yeah, oh,
be.
that's probably the source. Oh,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
Very
So
you're very practical.
yeah. So you have one for this year and the other one for next year, right?
Yeah,
You
one for the
can.
Reform Synagogue and one for the Orthodox.
To the one that you don't go, yeah.
Okay. So basically these rituals are, if we go back and as we read about a few more, they're going to involve this all of our senses, and that is another way of getting the message through that it is a more of a sacred occasion. Okay. And yes, go ahead, Marianne.
I don't mean to interrupt you more. You know, if I don't even know how to explain this, if the body is a temple, okay, then everything, all of our senses should be bringing us in closer contact with God, not how people have like tattooings and piercings and stuff. And I have my ears pierced. That it reminds us of the absolute splendor and wonder of the human body, of the human being. You know, and all animals are sensitive to sound, to smell, to light. To, yeah, we all share that we go back to this interconnectedness to a greater reality.
Okay.
Marty, I want to show you something that's completely not secular, but it's not done. Anyway, I have this
Oh, your print.
magnet.
You have to raise it up higher. There you go. Exactly what we're talking about.
Sacrilegious.
But instead of it being one note, it has two different notes.
Yeah. Okay, anyway.
That's good. That's good. No, but I was going to say something. When you think about the senses of hearing, and we're going to shift a little bit. This is not spiritual or anything. It's more science. The senses of smell, hearing, okay, taste,
Smell and
and
touch.
odor. Okay, so 4 out of the 5 senses.
How about touch?
Touch.
Not so much, not as much,
Okay.
but the others are more closely associated with memory.
Yeah, that would be hearing. That's
Well, that's what I just said. That's
yeah,
right.
right.
That's
But I
right.
would say I would focus on that one probably more than anything else.
Okay.
But the other senses, absolutely. But hearing, based on my so many years of this, hearing is absolutely that would be the very top, the very top to stir someone's memory. More than sight or sound would be paramount.
Okay. And the reason I say memory is that there's always a story attached. When you smell a particular odor, it's a whole story that comes to mind.
That's true.
Same thing if you hear, okay? And the same thing with sight, and the same thing with taste. A whole story unfolds. With touch, there are many things that can be sharp, burning, everything. And so you may remember the rule, hey, don't touch it if it's hot. But the story, the senses that, and they're mostly in the head region, are more closely associated with memory. That's all. You know, you can remember certain things, touch, if it's severe, oh, the day I lost a finger, or, the day I tripped over a broken arm or something like that. You can remember those things, but usually all these others give you a story of that relate to other individuals in the community, in a family, okay, different animals, so forth. And by the way, those are the shortest nerves that link up with the brain. And that can be mapped out, and you can see the interplay today when they can follow bioelectrical pathways, and they can see the interplay of all of these different senses in the cortex of the brain. And now some of them are lower down in the brain. Some are more centered in the midbrain area, but definitely how they're interpreted, they're all closer to that. And some people have even said that some of these are extensions of the brain itself. Not so much for touch. Anyway, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all of that, Marty, very much. There is something called music therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And that would lead me to think the way I do. There isn't any, as far as I know, there isn't anything called touch memory or smell memory or these other things you mentioned. However, those are important because for myself, I can tell you sometimes there's a distinct smell that will take me back many years that I haven't, done that. But nevertheless, music is a spectacular therapy. And I know after 10 years of playing at La Villa, at La Posada, I mean, I could, that was a great teacher for me. That taught me so much. And now I understand why they talk about music as a therapy. It really is amazing.
I agree. Yes, Marianne.
Okay, Dr. Marty, I have a question for you on this stuff. What happens in our pre-verbal stage of development when we're infants, when we're babies? How do these sensations, thoughts, sounds, aromas register with the brain? When you're even with a baby, some people can hold the baby very tenderly, and other people just want to smash it into a wall. How do these things then get implanted? I make a distinction between mind and brain. how do these things then get implanted as memory into the brain? I don't know if that's a clear question.
I honestly, I can only give you an opinion. I can't base it on fact because I don't, that's something I never really studied. Okay. But I do
We need
know,
Helene Fields.
yes, Helene, I was going to say in some of her writings, she was addressing sound as very important. And even to this day, people will play music, just so that the fetus, the developing fetus, can hear it, because we feel that sound is, I have not read the studies or anything. All I can say is that there's a school of thought that believes that sound is one of our first sentences that we are born with also, that we can sense it. And it makes sense in a way, because of but if that's true, it's the first sense and the last sense that we experience, if that's true. And I just am not an expert. I have not read anything about that, so I have to, it's just an opinion. Yes, there was someone else that had their, yes, Donna, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking in the past, and this is so distinct to me. My Uncle Bob had a garage by his house, and I remember that smell of the oil, that distinct smell. And I'm just guessing here, but the smell, how does it get implanted? I think there has to be the situation also needs to register, like it reminds me of my Uncle Bob. Okay.
Sure.
There was something there that was important. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has to be important for you to even remember it. It has
Right.
to do something inside. So anyway, I really don't. I like the smell of gas. I remember that too, gasoline, back when it smelled like that. Anyway, that wasn't a good memory, but yeah.
Okay, everybody has their thing.
Brain
Okay.
damage.
Yes, Rabbi.
So a thought keeps running through my mind, and it's a rhetorical question, I suppose. The biblical scholars talk in terms of exegesis and eisegesis, okay, of what's really there in the text and what we're putting onto the text.
We're putting it on the text. Right
Yeah,
now.
of what we can draw out as opposed to
Sure.
what we're putting into it. And I'm wondering, the many of the classical commentators and certainly the mystics, the Kabbalists, imposed onto or inferred
Lots of
onto,
that. Yes.
like the insights that Marty is giving us about and not just Marty, I don't, about the importance of sound and the way that we relate to the sound as opposed to some of the other senses. So the earliest mystics and commentators would say that was God's intention, or that was at least the insight and intention of the biblical writer. And that's why they chose to focus so much on the notion of Shema, of, that we should hear and listen to the sound of the shofar and listen to God and listen to Moses and, and whatever. And incidentally, even that God listens to us, incidentally. We can't forget that. Can't forget that also. As opposed to what Torah study like us, as opposed to Torah study that is trying to, okay, there's a lesson here. What can we draw out of that? What can we draw out of that lesson by by pairing it with the insights that we have from science or other literature and personal experience. The smell of the gasoline, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And I'm just I'm once again in awe of that balance, and that's what keeps this whole process going, and has for for centuries, of what we might infer that the classical text understood already thousands of years ago about the human condition, and what it is that the lesson is that we can draw even for our modern times. So I'm just in total awe at recognizing both opportunities.
And then you also have morning prayer that addresses all of the senses.
Sure.
Giving thanks and that they're all functioning. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating that so I think so is there a message here to get another discussion going? Maybe to use all
where
of
is
your
here?
senses to focus on what is sacred in the context of what we're reading. And I don't know. Comments? Yes, Michael. You're muted, I think.
Talking about a prayer for a moment, I'm not sure where I heard this or where I got this from, but are we supposed to say 100 prayers every day? Something to that effect? A prayer for everything that we do?
Yeah, there's a custom that arbitrarily uses the number 100. Yeah.
All
So,
right.
so I wasn't aware of that. Thank you. But yes, I know in the morning prayers, but if you're going to give thanks for all the different things that you come across and what you eat, and yeah, it'll probably be close to that, if not more.
Well, but the first prayer and the first one of those morning blessings of gratitude and miracles is
Mhm.
thanking God for giving the rooster the wisdom to discern between
They wake
night
me
and
up.
day, because
That
I was
otherwise we
able to
wouldn't
wake
wake
up.
up.
That's
Right.
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 the alarm clocks. Yeah. Now the other thing I wanted to, we're talking about how music make us remember, and that's why we include music in all kind of places. Now it's in our context. We have the tropes in the Torah,
Mhm.
which is a musical way
That's
of
right.
remembering. We also have, when you want to teach kids the alphabet, you said A, B, C, D.
Sure.
So attaching music is connecting in our brain probably the words themselves and the message themselves for us. So it goes both ways.
Very good. Any other comments? Well, would someone else like to do a little reading from verse 7 to the end of 10, the end of 11?
I'll
Okay,
give a
Michael.
I'll try. I just had to put some drops in. Anyway, on the 10th day of the same seventh month, you shall observe a sacred occasion when you shall practice self-denial. You shall do no work. You shall present to the Lord a burnt offering of pleasing odor, one bull of the herd, one ram, 7 yearlings lambs. See that they are without blemish. The meal offering with them of choice of flour, flour and oil mixed in shall be 3/10 of a measure for a bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram. Continue.
Oh, yeah, through the end of 11.
Oh, okay. 1/10 for each of the seven lambs, and there shall be 1 goat for sin offering, in addition to the sin offering of the expiation and the regular burnt offering with its meal offering, each with its libation.
Okay. So this is Yom Kippur.
Which is in the Torah is called Yom HaKippurim.
Right. Okay.
It's plural. Okay. And here the only official reference is to practice self-denial,
Right.
which at the time just meant fasting. The tradition has added many other, extended self-denial practices, if you will. But most of the ritual, the assumption is that the people already knew this because it had been commanded
Been
back in
mentioned before.
Leviticus.
Sure.
Yeah, so as with the role of the high priest, so they understood this, but this is the second time that the Torah goes through the list of all the whole ritual calendar, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. So any other comments? So on Yom Kippur, it's the sacrifices are for God, but the odor of the burnt offerings and the meal, etc. That's cruel punishment. It makes you hungry and you can't eat.
Well, I remember, Marty, as a child, when I was attending Orthodox shuls on Yom Kippur, there was a little can that it was passed around to everybody that you would take a smell from this particular whatever it was. And I never thought it was a pleasing odor, to tell you the truth. But just take a whiff of that and you pass it on. But I didn't, after that, I never saw it done when I attended a conservative synagogue in Hollywood, California. It was just removed. That wasn't part of it.
Could it
I
be
have
from the Havdalah time in which we smell? That the smell was passed around?
At the end of Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Well, at the end of Shabbat, at the end of Yom Kippur.
Yeah, but Michael's referring to Yom Kippur, right, Michael?
That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yom Kippur, right? And it was during the service, not after. Not it might have been done after, but I remember it was passed around very early on in the service. I can remember that.
Don't know.
Why I'm a little confused or surprised that it wasn't done in the conservative, not the conservative shul I attended. That wasn't done.
It's been almost 70 years since I went to an Orthodox synagogue on Yom Kippur. I don't remember that either, and certainly not in conservative or reform, but I don't remember that.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, Donna. Donna, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. One of the things that, as I've been part of this faith tradition, is that the repeating of it's the same amount, right? And there's a lot of repeating going on. You read it and then you kind of read it again.
Mhm.
Is that to really get it, as they say, drilled in, to get, because having things repetitive is
Sure.
in order to learn. And then also having, with me, not that many occasions, but 9 years of having, you look for, you know when it's going to happen. And the more you experience it in the reading is, yeah, it is repetitive, because as humans, we have a tendency, we hear it, we leave, and we don't follow through, or whatever that is. We need that in order to take it in, because we take it in differently. It's up here, you're learning, and then as I go along, it starts to come in here too, into the heart. So anyway.
My
Yeah.
question is why,
Good
and
point.
it's connected with that, the instructions are not for us.
Hmm.
We
For the
don't do
priest.
this stuff. I mean, the people don't do that. So, and it's written in plural. So, Rabbi, what's going on?
Well, the point was that that we don't do it today because there's no
Yeah,
temple.
I understand.
There's no, but the thought was that this is what they should be doing.
But not
This was the
personally.
cult that was being explained, and
Right, but
you
the
know,
korbanot were only done by the big guy. Not
You mean
everyone.
the
well,
priest?
but the people had to bring the amount,
Right,
bring
right.
the items, right, and that was their participation in it.
Yes.
So that's why I assume that's why it's in the plural.
But you see, guys, it's not that everyone make their own sacrifice. They brought the animals to be sacrificed in the temple by the people that work there, mainly the high priest with all the Levites that were there, I assume, helped him out. So it's not, Marianne, that you had to do it, or Donna, that you had to do it. What we have to do is remember to bring this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, yes, you do have to, but it is but the question I have is once the people brought the various animals to be sacrificed, this is for the community. You're doing it on behalf of the priests are doing it, uh, not just because of their role, they're doing it on behalf of the community. So what did the people do after they gave all of this livestock and the meal and the oil? What did they do? Did they go home or did they stay?
They went home.
Well, it depends. If it's on one of the festivals, they might have stayed in the area near the
Right.
temple just for the sake, just like we have the 2 day a year Jews. We have the Russian just to be there with everybody else. Kind of thinking while the ritual's going on, even if you're not paying attention to the ritual.
Good point.
And also, let's think that, people that live all over the country there, not each one has to bring all this stuff. So, it's a strange thing that, at least for me to understand how it was operating. It's not that everyone has to bring 3 of these and 2 of these. And It's not. It cannot be. So who are the people that bring it? I don't know. Uh, or if everyone brings, you have meat for 3 years there. I don't know how it worked.
Yeah,
Well, yes, go ahead, Ken.
that's precisely, thank you, Rabbi Murray, for sharing that. That's precisely what it just occurred to me in
Yes.
my fifth reading of it is like, well, you had a lot of people, but it's very precise, the numbers of what sacrificed and how many, and if everybody brought, so wow, how was that communicated? Because it's thousands of people. So I don't know. It never occurred to me how they'd figure that out.
But I would assume it wasn't just one clan or one tribe that was responsible to provide all of this.
Well, right. I wouldn't suspect that either. But was it each, not just the high priest, but each of the priest's subordinates
Mhm.
would perhaps observe the same tradition because there'd be more, or would it be one for everybody? And here's the other question. Would it be an honor, let's call it a mitzvah,
It is.
to take from your tribe or from your family the bull, when that had to be a very special, important animal at a time of living out in the wilderness, right? Or wherever they were living.
That's right.
So, or was it like, oh, gee, it's not my turn, is it? I mean, can't we find somebody else's bull? So,
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, take turns.
well, I don't know. I'm
Yeah, it doesn't
confused, which is
say.
a usual state for me often. with this.
So we're providing our own drosh. It doesn't quite say. I'm sure there may be scholars that have addressed this issue. I don't know.
Well, would
But
people have wanted to fight over the opportunity to bring their bull or their, ram or whatever it is, their goat, to the high priest, or was it they were like, oh, it's your turn, they drew lots?
Whoever
I don't know.
made the largest donation to the building fund, but
That's right.
Or maybe the one who didn't.
yeah, right, right.
anyway, yes,
Okay.
Rabbi.
The simple, and I'm going to call it an assumption, rather than the answer, but the simple assumption is that the the rabbis, and there's long discussion in the Talmud, obviously, about all of this, but that the assumption is that the mitzvah, again, the way we described it, the commandment is not that you must bring, it's that you must make sure that it is brought.
Ah,
Okay. So that's how they kind of say, oh, that doesn't mean that 600,000 people each is bringing, 7 bullocks and whatever but each has a role in ensuring that the sacrificial offering does take place. Now that's how they kind of answered the question that we're legitimately asking. Um, there is I forget the exact quote. It has something to do with the recognition that not everyone was going to be able to that the plan was that this would only happen in Jerusalem,
right.
and that ideally everyone would come to Jerusalem for the particular festival or whatever, but Jerusalem wasn't a large enough city to be able to accommodate all those people. So this is only referring to those who could make the Aliyah Regel, who could make the festival pilgrimage, the Hajj, if you will, to Jerusalem. And that, yes, they were, whether it was in an official way, as like we're voting for delegates, or just, Sam and Joe said from this village, hey, we plan on going this year. If we'll be glad to we'll be glad to take your lambs for you if you want. That something like that.
Yeah.
It's a, it would have been nice to let it, if they just had a one-liner that each, clan or was responsible for certain numbers. It would have been nice to see all of that, but it's not there. So we can come up with anything we know. Okay.
Right.
Maybe it was Martha Stewart's cookbook or something. Who knows?
Right. And what we don't, the other thing is that we don't know is how legitimate the descriptions that exist, like in Mishnah and Talmud, how legitimate those descriptions are. They may have been fantasy filled also.
Since we're in the midst of this discussion, we can still go on. I was going to save this for later, but it we'll probably forget what we're discussing now. This here is the numbers of animals to be offered on Sukkot are in multiples of 7. Now, we haven't read that yet, but if you think about it, this is a tremendous number. Okay, I'll save this for Sukkot when we read for Sukkot. But it's unbelievable. Well, I have it here. I may forget it if I don't do it now. The numbers of animals to be offered on Sukkot are in multiples of 7.
Right.
7 bullock or bulls, 98 lambs, 14 rams, 7 goats. And in the Talmud, it says the 70 bulls serve as atonement for the 70 nations of the world.
Right.
Implying Israel's responsibility for humanity's sins. And the 98 lambs serve to avert the 98 curses in Deuteronomy.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't gotten there yet. But this is an awful lot of animal sacrifices. A lot of grain is being used. The oil. It really is astonishing. We discussed that before. Well, where are we now? We're starting on the 15th, verse 12, right? So this is where this comes from. So you want to who would like to read?
Marty?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The thought just ran
Oh, it's
through.
okay.
And yes, I'm being a little cynical, but there may be a truth here. Okay. We also have a leader of our country who talks in terms of, oh well, this is the greatest, and we have the greatest number, and and da 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 da, and all this compared to anybody else. And there may be a little bit of revisionist history in the writing here also.
Well,
It wasn't so much of,
but you would hear those
wait a minute,
same words.
it just doesn't make sense to use those kind of numbers.
I know.
Doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense.
But I do
We're gonna
know
claim
that
it
if I
anyway.
were in Canada, somebody would be saying something similar. And
Yeah.
if it were in France,
Yeah.
somebody would be, and same thing in Germany. It's to get the people to do something.
And to be proud of what it is
That's right. That's right.
that the story is of what they've done.
So when you put it in context of Torah, this is another group of people doing these things, and the bigger the better. Well, that doesn't always work. Sometimes it's this little small voice that's more important. But for the ritual, this is the recipe we follow. As long as the temple is still there. Yes.
Right.
Sona.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, the different amounts of sacrifices with the bulls and the goats and lambs, is that pointing out more of the importance of the festival? Or, having that many, was it Sukkot that has Sukkot? So that amount, does it put that festival up higher than the other ones? And what does that mean, having more bulls and stuff? What does that signify?
Well, each sacrifice is for something else,
Oh,
a different reason. So perhaps that's why they need as many, although now we did not get to 15, right? Because there's something is happening that might explain some things. But as far as sacrifices, yeah, each sacrifice is for a different thing. And I think, I mean, what comes to my mind is that when we talk about prayers, when we talk about prayers for God or to praise God, we have one that is asking God for stuff, one is thanking God for something, and one is praising God for the strength. So even in the prayers, we differentiate, but and it's difficult to remember, I mean, for me, which one is for what, but we say lechaper, to atone for the people or for one person or things like that. That perhaps is the answer. That's why you need several, and the difference between them and who's more important, I don't know. I know that there are different sacrifices, reasons for sacrifice.
So yeah, I think from the standpoint of things, let's put it this way. Our lives are conducted by a series of recipes that we follow each day. Now you think about it, and here you're going to say, okay, now wait a minute. For the recipe for what you have to do each day to get through the day, now this is added on to make you stop and think about something different. And maybe that's why so much was added in here. These were huge amounts of work, as was pointed out.
Yep.
So maybe that's one of the reasons why maybe it's designed for something other than just making a sacrifice. Why do you get rid of leavened bread products, and then for Passover you only have matzah? That's a sacrifice. It's a different form of, it's
Is it a sacrifice
supposed to be
or
a
no?
sacred period.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a sacrifice. I'd call it an educational tool.
Okay, so I'll call it a comma as opposed to a huge sacrifice that may be a colon or a semicolon or a
Leave my
period.
colon out of it, doctor.
But
Thank you.
so is it is that important? What does Sukkot represent? What is the holiday of Sukkot? What does it represent?
Thanksgiving, gratitude, harvest.
That's right.
And remember, and some people will say, remember how we walk in the desert and we didn't have houses and we did that. There are a lot of explanations for that. Now, Marty, I think that when you say sacrifice, you don't use the putting of the bull in the fire. You're talking, I'll sacrifice my Shabbat and I'll go to visit Green Valley. I'll sacrifice something without, it's not burning something, but
Different. That's right.
I'll do it instead of doing something of value. So Rabbi Norm, by day 5, I sacrifice by not eating bread. Trust me, I just. And in Israel, people go to the Arab side to buy pitas.
Right.
But it's the different sacrifice. Here is the actual the sacrifice, and we use it metaphorical for giving something of value, I suppose, to do instead of, time is a
Okay.
sacrifice because you cannot get it back.
Okay, there's one for the ritual and there's one for personal giving something up, if I was to summarize it. Yes,
Yeah, I think
Marianne.
kind of like what Rabbi Mary was saying, it doesn't have to, it's a giving of the self, of the pride, of the ego, of sacrificing my bowl of ice cream so you can have it, that it's giving of ourselves to other people, not just the bowls and to me, this sounds like a big potluck and I wouldn't want to clean up the mess, but it's giving of ourselves to enhance the well-being of someone else.
Yeah.
Or something else.
Right, or
right.
something else.
And
It-
something, the real sacrifices are connected with it. Because if I have a cow or a sheep or something that's of value for me, I'll sacrifice as a present for God. At the same time, the Levites are going to have something to eat, but it's giving something of value as an offering, and they call it an offering. Yeah.
Okay.
Marty,
Rabbi Norman, go ahead. Yes.
just real quick, a question.
Go ahead, Ken.
And I may have missed it in an earlier section or chapter, but several times this morning, the reference is, well, this is while the temple stood. These are the rituals and traditions. Well, the temple didn't stand. Well, there was no temple at the time that this was written and given as the law. So why is it said that it was restricted to when the temple stood?
There is no early or late in the Torah. The timeline is not a timeline as we know it. So you can talk about it. You can say, well, now the people are in the desert, so they couldn't sacrifice. And what are they talking about the temple now here when the temple wasn't there and they are not in Jerusalem, etc., etc. So I think instructions are giving.
Well,
Yeah,
some of
it's all
these
in the
rituals
context
stop.
of when you enter the land and when you
Right.
when you can do this, this is the ideal structure of what your peoplehood will look like.
So why was it stopped at the end? These rituals stopped with the destruction of the second temple.
There's no temple, there's no sacrifices.
There's no temple, there's no sacrifices, there's no lineage of the Kohanim or the Leviim.
That's right.
Everyone has been dispersed and whatever.
That's why
So-
some people are waiting for the next temple. And well, we won't get into politics, but that's one of the things that is
Yeah.
happening, or has been happening for a lot of generations, waiting for the next temple, the
Which-
Messiah to come and to build the next temple.
And that's why a lot of fuss is made over finding a red heifer. And so when they want the purity of the red heifer, is it, and they, I mean, they scan it like to look for the slightest, defect in, or a hair or something that isn't red, or it's a reddish brown. So are they trying to obtain? I'm going to look at it two ways. So looking for all the purity of the animal, okay, would signal that there would be a temple to be to be built. Or is it the other way around, that looking for an impurity gives us a reason for not going back to building a temple?
Could you say that again, please? That kind of got lost there.
Okay, if you find the animal to be pure, it's obvious you're building a temple. But now with the antithesis is also possible. Finding a blemish, I don't have to build a new temple.
Well, but
Or I
Marty,
can't build a new temple.
right. I mean, you're presenting of the dichotomy is true, but finding the red heifer is not the only
That's right. That's correct.
criterion for building the temple,
Mhm.
which will only happen in messianic times.
Right.
Right.
So
So
this
then
is,
then
but
then
these are all
that
different
tension,
interpretations
yeah,
that have
that
been built
tension or that
upon.
dichotomy
That's right.
is which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do
Right.
you build the temple to bring the Messiah, or you wait for the Messiah to come and announce that it's okay to build the temple?
That's
Right?
that's right.
And you
So
got
no,
Bernie and Ernst. It's here. No, it's there. No, it's here. No, it's there. Okay.
and then there's the discussion that we have to say, or is the temple what's up here to remind us? All these stories are to remind us of, of this. And maybe it's good to force us to think about these different rituals and what their meaning, and extend it beyond just face value. Anyway, let's read on. Who would like to read now?
I'll read.
Okay, and then the next we'll divvy it up. So if you would like to read verses 12. Wait a minute, just 1 second. I want to
Mhm.
see.
There will be
Well,
a
we'll see
test
how
on this
far we get
afterwards,
with
right?
discussion and everything. But why don't you, it's a long one. And when you get tired of reading Kent, then I'll ask Mary Ann to continue. Okay, so because it's a very lengthy section here.
So you want me to
So
read all the way through
starting with
30,
verse 12, and when you
9 or
get
whatever?
tired,
Okay. Okay.
okay, then Mary Ann will continue the rest to
Okay.
the end. Right.
All right, here we go. Verse 12. On the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. 7 days you shall observe a festival to the Lord, of the Lord. You shall present a burnt offering and offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. 13 bulls of the herd, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs, they shall be without blemish. The meal offering with them of choice flour with oil mixed in shall be 3/10 of a measure for each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 for each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 for each of the 14 lambs. And there shall be 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. Second day, 12 bulls of the herd, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libations. Third day, 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. Fourth day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. Fifth day, 9 bulls, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. Sixth day, 8 bulls, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libations. Seventh day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bulls, rams, and lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. On the 8th day you shall hold a solemn gathering. You shall not work at your occupations. You shall present a burnt offering, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bull, the ram, the lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering, and libation. All these you shall offer to the Lord at the stated times, in addition to your votive and freewill offerings. They burnt offerings, meal offerings, libations, or offerings of well-being. So
Okay,
Moses,
why don't we
Okay.
stop there?
Partridge in a pear
Okay,
tree.
that's exactly.
Daenu.
That's the very
That's
good.
I'm glad we're coming up on Pesach, because I
Yeah.
started to chuckle
That's
with
right.
that.
I was
Breaking the Daenu. All right, go ahead.
So
That's
I
right.
I
had
have
the- yeah.
I have to tell a story. They one of the senior rabbis at a conservative congregation in Detroit. I interacted with him any number of times in my years there, and we were together for a Beit Din at a conversion where we met with the woman who was choosing to become Jewish, and before she went to the mikvah, and this and that and this and that, and this rabbi was known for pulling little pranks, kind of thing, and so when we were all asking questions and trying to make it a very comfortable setting, and it got to be his turn, he said, "Ray, I have 2 questions to ask you. One is, can you name all the books of the Tanakh, all the books of the Bible backwards?" And she got this horrified look on her face, and then he said, "Well, if that's too difficult, then I want you to tell me the list of all the lambs and the rams and everything on each day of the festival of Sukkot. And she, until we calmed her down and said, "No, he's joking. He's joking. He's joking." It was a horrible, horrible kind of thing. But whenever I see this section, I remember I remember that moment. How dare you do that?
That's right.
And then she drowned in the mikveh.
Yeah, he also used to say, "Okay, before you go to the mikveh, let me make sure that they've let the sharks out." That kind of thing. So
So now the question has to be
Yes,
raised.
Rabbi.
Why so much of the grain and the livestock, being sacrificed?
well, it had to
Birth
be more. It
control.
had to be more than a token.
That's right.
It had to have effect.
So put it in context of, my question is, within the context of the Sukkot holiday, if you will, or feast. Is it just saying this is a great thank you for having allowed us to have a harvest, a plentiful harvest?
Well, you're headed into winter. And maybe you cull the herd. I don't know.
Well, no, it had to be the best of the herd.
The best of the herd, but what I'm saying is you
Yeah.
cull it in a way because you're not going to sustain. It's difficult to sustain whatever large herd you had by that time of year. Maybe.
Norm, is anything in the Talmud explaining that?
Probably, but I'm not familiar with it. No, but probably you have to go to Masechet Sukkot and start to look.
I just
Donna, I'm sorry, I just didn't
Okay.
raise
Yes,
my hand.
Donna.
Yeah, with what Kent was saying, because there's less bulls as you go along, right? And the bulls impregnate, they bring in new crop. That's why they had a reduction, because it's the same thing same number with the lambs and goats, whatever. That didn't change, but the bulls did. There was less bulls that were sacrificed. What do they use bulls for anyway? For beast of burdens, or other than sacrifice?
propagation.
Is as good as anyone else. Just,
I
what
don't
do you
know.
think?
Well, what I had just said, I think that there was more value in having more bulls than there was, with the lambs and the other, And I'm thinking then it must have been, there's importance of that in maybe different ways as a beast of burden to help with the crops or whatever.
Yeah. It's like a tractor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again,
Interesting
and then you
point.
get into the question back, like what Kent had raised and that Rabbi Miri responded that there's no time frame. I mean, we know that bulls and cows were very prevalent on the Golan Heights, or the area known as the Golan Heights, these days. So they must have had plenty in the flocks to be able to make those sacrifices. Whether they actually had them or could envision having them out when they were still in the desert, that's kind of iffy.
Yeah. Well, here's one for you. So there's many reasons in today's contemporary societies where you gild your bulls, right? You castrate them. And I don't know if any of those reasons applied back then. In other words, I would think that would be done for those who were beasts of burden, as opposed to just bulls for propagation and continuing, to copulate with whatever cattle. But so the question is, if gilding was a practice, even to quiet them down, so that's part of the practice, or it had been historically, would a sacrifice of a bull have been, would a gilded or castrated bull been worthy for a sacrifice? And I ask that without having any idea. I don't know.
Well, what do you think?
I would think not. I would think if castration was a practice employed for certain purposes of bulls with the ancient Israelites, that they would not have used a bull that had been castrated for sacrifice on a holy day. That would be my take, but I don't know the answer to the first part of that.
That's my take too. I don't know if it's correct or not.
Mhm.
Now, go ahead, Norm.
No, it's okay, Mary, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that whenever I read this fascinates me is in Genesis, is when Jacob works for Laban, what you call it, Lavan, and he manages to have lambs much more than other people, because he knew how to cross the good ones from the bad ones, etc. So
Yes.
with that, that knowledge, it doesn't matter when they wrote this, but the knowledge of treating animals in that kind of DNA and so forth, it's a fascinating thing. And Ken, I wouldn't be surprised if there was something to do with how you bring up your cattle, what do you do, and so forth. Is it castrated or not? But in my mind, when they wrote all this stuff, they knew a lot about crops. They knew a lot, like they tell you, 7 years you work this and then you stop. And we know that these are things that make sense. So I don't know if the writer well, I don't know. They don't talk about castration and that stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if that knowledge was not embedded in the people, the ancient people. And maybe it's later on when they are in Canaan. I don't know. That was my associations.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, when they talk about an animal without blemish,
Mm-hmm.
that meant in a natural way, as opposed to so something that
Right.
didn't have a birth defect, I guess would be the
Right.
phrase that we would say, as opposed to an animal that had been castrated, an animal that there had been a particular procedure done, an animal that had suffered an accident, with a broken leg or something. It really meant only
Very
the
good.
natural birth defect that was obvious. So again, like Rabbi Miri said, I'm not sure that castration specifically or the gilding process was included in the descriptions. But my guess is that's a different category.
I don't know. I like what you said, because it makes some sense that castration, if in fact it was applied, would be a factor that would omit a particular a bull from being sacrificed.
And
Because
actually, to
of
take
what
it
you
one
said.
step further, my guess is that if there was an animal that was totally without blemish like that, then it probably would have been guarded, and preserved
By the
and
owner.
put over in the in the kennel, in the corral of, don't touch this one. We need to save it
Mhm.
for the sacrifice.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Marty, what comes to mind, which is not connected to animals, what Rabbi Norm was saying are natural blemishes. Someone that an animal doesn't have an eye when he's born, or broken legs, or no legs, or whatever. The issue of blemishing is a very important thing in the, how should I call it? In the Tanakh, in the Torah, let's say, or in the Talmud. And they talk about people that have blemishes in regard to being witnesses, in regard to other things. It's something that was a very important issue, to be pure.
Tamim.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
right.
that's that word. So I'm not surprised that they wanted someone perfect.
Thank you.
Which incidentally, what Rabbi Miri is saying is when the adjective is used to describe a human being, it's one of the highest attributes. Ishtam
Talmud,
haya.
yeah. But Bedorotav.
Well, that's Noach, but there are others. There are
Yeah,
others who are given, and the psalmist in Tehillim, and the psalmist uses that frequently.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's the name, yeah.
Did everybody follow that?
No.
Okay.
That's because none of us have reached that level that level of to be described that way.
Yeah.
So any other comments about this? Okay. David, why don't you read just verse 1 of the next chapter? Or just verse 1.
He's muted.
David, you're muted.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
And Moses told the children, to do this again. And Moses told the children of Israel according to all that the Lord commanded Moses.
Okay. Now, why do we not have it as maybe verse 40 in chapter 29? That line. Suzanne is listening in, and she would say, "Oh, wait a minute, yeah." And those who have plowed on page 1215 at the bottom, they have an explanation here.
Because they're switching from animals to humans.
Well, here you have no. Does this verse belong in the previous chapter, or is it part of the chapter as it's written here?
Oh, it belongs here because they're switching
Because
gears.
all it says that this is, you are to do it this way, and then you could say, so Moses spoke to the Israelites just as the Lord had commanded Moses.
Right. Marty, I believe perhaps because it's separates or delineates between the secular and the divine, where it's just,
Okay.
that's my take.
Any other comments? Rabbi Plout says, in Christian Bibles, this verse is counted as verse 40 in chapter 29.
Right.
Hence, the verse numbering in chapter 30 differs from 1 by the text commonly used by Jews. It should be noted that all chapter divisions are of medieval Christian origin and do not necessarily go back to the Masoretic text. So when we are reading all of these chapters in the books, it's like reading a Torah scroll. If we're reading the Hebrew version, but is the scroll itself divided into chapters like that? That's right. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Yeah, it's not, the scroll is not divided, but the portions are.
That's right.
And the answer that I always had heard of why this verse was put there and included, forget the chapter verse numbers, because that's a Christian thing.
It's arbitrary.
The Jewish
Yeah, that's right.
community adopted it, but it's a Christian thing. The Jewish community always went according to the portions, and they included the phrase about the this is what God commanded to Moses, because the portion began with the zealotry of Pinchas.
Right.
Okay. And
That's
so,
right.
which caused so much debate as whether that was a true way of, of showing loyalty and fealty to God. Now at the end of it, they want to end it. The
Right.
punctuation mark is, this is the real way that you're supposed to be participating to God. That's what I was always taught.
Okay. Any other comments?
And also from a point of view of just the chapter beginning, is that a lot of these chapters, like 29, they begin, or somewhere in the chapter, the Lord is speaking to either Moses or to the children of Israel together. But in chapter 30, it has Moses who is telling the children. And then it goes on, and Moses spoken to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, and so this is a change of who is speaking. So that's what I would thought it was appropriate to have a new chapter here.
Okay. Good point. Good point. All right. So with that, are there any announcements?
Just a
Yes, Rabbi.
reminder to watch for the emails and whatever. I'm blanking on the actual dates, but I think it's the 8th, April 8th, that I'm doing a Zoom adult education thing, back to basics, for people who are unfamiliar with how the Torah and the Tanakh are structured, how to look for certain chapters and verses and whatever. And like I was just saying, that Jewish tradition structures more according to the portions than chapters and verses, and where the Mishnah fits in, and the Talmud, and all those kind of examples of all those different things. I think it's the April 8th, I think.
Torah
Okay.
101.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what time of day do you recall?
I think
Maybe
it's at
10 a.m.?
o'clock. It's either that or maybe it's noon.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I haven't seen that in a recent,
There's an email. There's an email
announcement.
coming. Well, it's in
Okay.
the shofar that'll be coming
Okay, got
April
it.
1st,
Okay.
and then there's also an email that'll be the beginning of next week.
Very
coming.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Okay.
what's happening with Joshua?
Joshua also is on hiatus
14th.
for another couple of weeks, and
Okay.
then I think as of the middle of April, I think we restart.
Okay, could
for
you
teachers.
send, please, the Zoom Connect? I put the one that I had and I didn't get you.
Oh,
So-
okay, all right, yeah, I'll try
Thank
to
you,
make
thank
sure.
you.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, Marty, thank you so much, and rabbis, thank you, and
Welcome.
fellow
Thanks,
Torah
everybody.
study folks.
Yeah.
It's good to
Okay.
see you.
Shalom.
Thank you,
Shabbat shalom.
Marty.
Shabbat shalom then.
Shabbat
Bye.
Take care.
shalom
Shabbat
to
shalom.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.